quite the question that the Christian business person, not even the Christian business person, but most business people face when it comes to business ethics is what exactly is this connection between good ethics and good business? Right? From a Christian worldview, I think we can say pretty clearly that good ethics is always good business by definition. Because good business, what constitutes good business is much broader than just profitability. But when people in the culture talk about this, that's not what they mean. They want to know, well, what's the connection between good ethics and profitability, all other things being equal. And they recognize, granted, if you're incompetent, you can be upright and incompetent and you're going to fail. So that's all other things being equal, what's the connection? I think in the short term, there's probably not much connection at all. If any, it's probably an inverse relation. That good ethics is rarely profitable. Because if you think about it, if it were always good business in terms of profitability, then everybody would do it all the time unless they were just stupid or short-sighted. But that's clearly not true. You have a lot of smart people who are engaged in systematic, unethical behavior because it benefits them in the short run. Right? In the long run, I think you can make a better case for good ethics contributing to profitability because of the factor of trust and trustworthiness. And that most businesses that are dependent upon repeat customers, this is a really high value for them. And they recognize that if they lose the trust of their customers and suppliers and other people who are critical constituents for them, they're going to have a hard time staying in business. I mean, think about, ask your students, how many of you would go out of your way to do business with people who you trust? And I think, most people would say, yeah, I probably would if it's not too inconvenient. But if you reframe the question, you'll get a lot more passion in their response. If you frame it like this and say, how many of you would go out of your way to avoid doing business with people who you don't trust? I'll bet you every hand in your classroom will go up. And I think this goes globally as well. I think that empirically, the cultures where the corruption index is the highest also have some of the lowest rates of economic growth and some of the lowest rates of foreign investment. And it's totally understandable that people don't want to invest in countries where corruption is high because they're not sure, they don't have the confidence or the trust that the product that ought to carry the day on the merits will actually do so. I have a really vivid example of this. One of my former students came to Talbot from Ethiopia, and he had really never been more than probably 50 miles from his home before he came to school here, had never had a desk and his own table to work at before. Remember, he took one step into our dining hall at Biola, and immediately he was so overwhelmed by the amount of food that was available, he immediately walked out and vowed to skip one meal a day. Right? Second day he was in the United States, I took him out for lunch. And I paid for lunch with a credit card. And he literally asked me, he said, "What's that?" And he had never seen a credit card and had never experienced a credit transaction before. And I shuddered to think what was going through his mind. As the server brought my credit card and the bill back, I signed it, and we walked out. I suspect he thought that, good night here. Only been here for 2 days. My ethics professor is stealing our lunch. But he had no conception that American Express trusts me to pay the bill in 30 days. Now, if there's no grounds for that trust, it's rescinded. And that the restaurant similarly trusts American Express to pay the bill within 30 days. And likewise, if that trust is abused, then it's rescinded. But he said that would never happen in where I'm from. In fact, he said frequently what happens in where he's from is that the seller keeps one hand on the product and the buyer keeps one hand on the money, and they both release them at the same time. At which point I pointed out to him that his transaction costs for every transaction, they were off the charts. They were so high. And that, the fact that nobody trusted each other to do business with them was one of the reasons why the country remained relatively impoverished. Right? And there's good empirical evidence that in cultures where interpersonal trust outside family members is high, that the ground is the most fertile for the entrance of a market economy. And Francis Fukuyama and others who have done this research actually attribute much of this groundbreaking trust to the existence of churches and synagogues and other religious organizations where people learned that they could trust each other outside the blood family relations. And so for the average person who came to the UK or to the United States, the network of relationships that they had from their church, these were people who they trusted because of their common faith, made a huge difference in establishing that fertile ground for the introduction of the Industrial Revolution and for a market economy. So for the business person, it seems to me that trust is essential for the long-term success and viability of your business.